Hello, Jack. Welcome to GoCast. How are you?
Very good. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. If you don't mind just introducing yourself, who you are, where you come from, what do you do, and then we can jump in.
I am a displaced auto mechanic who ended up somehow dealing with computers. And if you dealt with computers back in the 90s, you learned about security, whether you wanted to or not. I thought it was kind of interesting. I came at the hacker world more from just trying to keep the computers running and safe, but that led to security and hacker world. And when I saw the handwriting on the wall for the automotive industry in the U.S. many years ago, I jumped to being full-time in the tech industry, first at Astaro, the little German firewall company, later acquired by Sophos. And then for many years, I was working with friends at Tenable. Then I retired a little over 3 years ago. Now I work on old Jeeps and Euro motorcycles and build guitars and banjos and do blacksmithing and welding and whatever else strikes my fancy. So I do all kinds of stuff these days, and none of it having anything to do with tech, with the exception of staying in touch with the community through the BSides community.
We received a lot of people at the GoCast, and we're always like, went to B-side, and or they are like B-side organizer, and not sure everyone knows the story or where it come from.
BSides have thousands of origin stories, but the idea of BSides came about late 2000s. There was a general frustration with over-commercialization with some events, and some had a real lack of community feeling. Some have some great community feeling, but they're a corporate sense of community, not just open and welcoming to the randomly curious people. And so those frustrations would happen regularly, and that was back in the early days of Twitter, and so long before it was filled with celebrities and journalists, and certainly before politicians. And we used to have ongoing conversations instead of only seeing each other at ShmooCon or DEF CON or Black Hat RSA. And in 2009, people got their rejection notices from Black Hat. In fairness to Black Hat, they get far too many good talks and they do the best they can with what they've got. And that was when they were at their previous location where they really couldn't expand a lot. So there was a lot of frustration, and a handful of us took a look at who got turned down and why. In fairness to Black Hat, as soon as they moved from where they were to where they've been for many years now, they were able to be a more inclusive event. But during those days, what triggered it was just a lot of frustration over who got turned down. And generally what we saw was there were a variety of talks that wouldn't appeal to a huge audience, or maybe they were not quite ready for the Black Hat stage for one reason or another, or maybe they just weren't a Black Hat talk at the time, social or political or otherwise edgy. And we realized a random bunch of people had spent a lot of time saying, too bad there isn't a place for this one. And so a friend, actually somebody I had not met in person, or if I had only in passing, Chris Nickerson, had rented a house in Las Vegas during Black Hat DEF CON week and said, hey, Travis Goodspeed's going to do NeighborCon there. Why don't we do this thing there and just use the big room for formal talks? And you don't want to listen to the talk that's going on, you can go into the kitchen and grab a snack or jump in the swimming pool in the backyard, have side conversations. So we made it happen. A whole bunch of people, a lot of folks from the DC 303, the Denver area DEF CON crew, made it happen. We just did this, what we thought was probably going to be a one-off thing. If it worked, we might do it again the next year in Vegas. And there were talks that were things that you might expect at a conference and things that just were less likely to hear at a conference at those times. From Jonathan Cran's talk on the transition from being a pen tester to managing the pen test team where he was. And ours is not the only industry where we don't always do a great job of transitioning people and preparing them for management roles. It's cliche that across all industries almost, we tend to do a horrible job of providing people the tools necessary to transition into management, which leaves the hole open for MBAs who have no idea about whatever industry they're going into. And so that creates the MBA hate because there's a void to be filled and it gets filled. There were talks on things you would expect, things you wouldn't. There were some off the record talks because people didn't, for a variety of reasons, things couldn't be recorded or streamed or screenshots because of the data that was out there. There was a panel discussion on gender issues in the industry. I mean, many years before the big commercial events would touch diversity in our industry. Social, political kinds of issues were brought up as well as hardcore technical stuff. And it was very relaxed. People loved it, wanted more. And so it took off from there. That was late July 2009. And a group of friends made one happen in Mountain View, California at the end of 2009. April 2010, we were in San Francisco, and a whole bunch of people made the B-sides happen. And 10 days later, Ben Tom Have and I we helped jumpstart one in Austin, Texas. There'd been some locals that were planning to launch it, but life happened. And so we said, you know what? The Austin tech community is such that if we give this a little jumpstart, it'll take off, which it did. A few months later, Boston and then Denver, and we were back in Vegas, realized we had started something. And we still had no idea at that time what we had started. But the key to it is the rules are pretty simple. It is not like some of the more structured things where they're all supposed to look and feel the same. BSides should look and feel like they are an event put on by and for the local community. Obviously, there are a few outliers, Las Vegas being the big one, because there are quite a few people in the security and hacker community in Vegas who are part of BSides Las Vegas. Tens of thousands of us descend on the city to sweat every summer. Same with San Francisco to a lesser extent, though, because the San Francisco community is huge and does most of the work themselves. You get beyond those big cities, then it becomes more and more local. That's really where I think BSides makes a profound difference. I love the big events, but the places that don't have an alternative, that don't have much of a community resource or have a limited number of community gatherings, BSides events and other community events really provide a connection in places that desperately need one. If you live in San Francisco and don't go to BSides San Francisco, shame on you, but there's going to be another conference that's going to be interesting to you. There's one down the street later that same week. Las Vegas, right? Between Black Hat, DEF CON, Diana Initiative, all the adjacent things. I'm speaking to somebody who wants to do an event in Togo in West Africa.
Wow.
They don't have a lot of other options, right? These things are rare. And so the smaller and more regional events have a more profound impact per capita. And between all of them, they have this global sense of communities, and it is just amazing.
And then how far went B-side? It's amazing. And you mentioned Africa. I did have someone from Kano, Africa on the podcast. And then we're going to sponsor that B-side because, we want to help the community, right? And what you're saying is so true. Now, do you know how many B-side there is in the world right now?
I just ran the numbers. As far as I know, the 21 in November. But as we're sitting here, let me pull it up. As of September 1, 2025, there have been 1,160 B-sides events held around the world in 269 cities spanning 67 countries.
Wow. What a legacy.
It's amazing. We hit 1,000 last year in the summer, and it was 3 events on the same day, one in Britain, one in Mexico, and one here in the U.S. And it was genuinely amazing. Basingstoke in Britain, Mexico City, and then Albuquerque here in the United States. That was event 1,000, and that was last summer. And here we are, 160 events since then. It continues to take off. The events are wild and diverse. Some are small, some are funky, some are more corporate. The vibe should be really about community and sharing with community. The rules are very simple. The very short version of it is be good to and for your community. Don't sell out. Keep it open. Keep people informed. It's not a scan your badge, spam you kind of event. We want sponsors to be part of the community. And that's on us too as BSides organizers, because some of the big commercial events just want our money when we're there to exhibit. And they don't always treat us well, in my opinion. And having done a lot of conferences, we don't want that. We want them to be there to meet people, to talk about technology, to recruit, to just support the community. They may get leads, but it's not about leads. It's about being part of the community and helping support the community and getting your name out there. You certainly will build a reputation, which makes it easier to hire when you need to hire. And we want them to feel welcome and to feel like part of it. We don't want people to feel like some of the events, which just assume everyone that goes is in sales. And there are a lot of technical people that end up buying extra badges because the exhibitor badge doesn't get them in. We don't want that. So don't sell out. There shouldn't be sales pitches and things. Keep it open. You need an open call for papers. It's not a curated content event. Some of those are phenomenal. Some of them are not. It's fine to invite 1 or 2 people as keynotes, but you got to reach out to all the clubs and groups and college, university, professional, whatever you can find. I always joke, I don't think there are any hackers meeting at mall food courts anymore. There aren't that many mall food courts left, but back when B-Sides started, that was still a thing. Find those people, get them to submit things that they think are cool that they're working on. That's to keep it open and keep people informed. Just stay in touch so people know how to find you, because when people are new to B-Sides, they go to the wiki, which we finally are getting off later this year, but it's there and that's where people start. And then we need the big list of events and that's it. Your event should look and feel like the event that you do for your community. And that's different than a lot of event series. And, there's certainly something to be said for brand management or whatever, but B-Sides is not that. B-Sides is by and for the communities.
Yeah, and you can see it. And each B-side I've attended have quite the same culture and sense of community, which is super important. And there's one in Montreal, there's one in Quebec, there's one in St. John. Have you yourself attended to B-side that are completely super far away from from where you live?
I've certainly been to a couple in Canada. Went to the first BSides Ottawa, which was the first BSides event outside of the United
Oh,
States.
is it? Nice.
That was fall of 2010. Met a few people. That one helped spawn BSides in St. John's, the longest running BSides in Canada. That one's coming back up. They're on event like 15 something. Later that year, I was at the inaugural BSides in Berlin. I think that's the furthest flung, but I've been to BSides in London, in Copenhagen, all over the US, and a handful in Canada as well. Haven't gotten much further than that. And as much as I traveled, it's time to travel less. Also, it turns out once you leave a company, they stop paying for your travel. And so that's a factor. I've been to a lot, but since retiring, I'm really not paying attention to the industry. I have done a couple of talks, but they're not technical because that's not me anymore. You don't go to BSides, generally speaking, to hear about blacksmithing, vintage Jeeps, lutherie, things like that.
I guess you're still giving some talks here and there. Your experience in all these three you have has so much power when it comes to what's happening today because you've seen so much. But in cyber, it's still the same classic best practice.
It is. And we're currently going through the AI hype cycle. And yes, each cycle freaks people out. First time somebody put a terminal outside of the room where the computer lived, there was panic, right? We had, blanking on his name, that came up with the idea of a password so that only the right person could do it. Client server was, depending on who you listen to, was going to be the end of the world or bring utopia. Cloud, bring us, and with most things, truth somewhere in the middle. It would be great if we didn't completely freak out every time, looked at it and said, all right, wait a minute. How much of this can I look in history and see what we've learned and apply to this? Okay, there's a bucket of stuff. How much we just have to start fresh, try to figure it out. Okay, there's another bucket. Where's the gray area? Let's focus on the gray. All right, here we go. Deep breath. Let's dig in. But that's not human nature, right? It's not fun. It's fun to panic. It's fun to do those things. It continues. But what's one of the things that I like to stress is, which especially in the hacker world, cybersecurity too, but there's huge overlap, but trying to treat any of these as monolithic is silly. One of the most important things I've done is remind people that they're people. It's why at BSides, we had ongoing conversations about stress and burnout in our industry, which led to more conversations about being on spectrum. It led to conversations about self-care. It led to mental health. We had people like Violet Blue, whose talks talked about sexuality. She's talked about the use of substances and sexuality, other things. It's like, I don't care how cool you think you are and how brilliant you think you are. There's probably a beating heart and lungs and stuff, and you have friends and family, and things are going to go wrong in your life, and you should take care of yourself. By the way, if you build community, we're going to take care of each other. Not to sound like the idealistic old hippie that I am, but let's be real. I can be pretty well burnt out and cynical about the large parts of the industry, but the people, what an amazing bunch of curious, brilliant, entertaining, and kind people our communities are full of. And that's why 3.5 years retired, I still do BSides stuff every day because the people are what keeps me moving. Again, not to sound too overly idealistic, but it's not just in tech. We got to take care of each other. And then that means helping each other through our careers. I couldn't have done my job if it weren't for the people at the user groups because I had no support when I got into tech full time. So it was local user groups. And when I learned something, I shared it. The next thing you know, we're having a chat here and you're there in that stylish red chair.
And this you find in B-Side more than any of the other event, right?
I am heavily invested in BSides, but I am more heavily invested in community. FCON takes a hit every year because it's too big, but it's not too big. If you restrict growth, then people feel left out. So how do you do that? You find your people. Now, granted, at some big events, it's harder to find your people, but I always tell people, if you find DEF CON overwhelming, go to the villages, hang out in the villages. It's a much more manageable thing. And then once you get grounded, then you're like, okay, this isn't that overwhelming. It just takes a little bit of focus. The late ShmooCon now, absolutely phenomenal sense of community in that event. And so it's not unique to B-Side, but I think we really try to make that a critical component of B-Sides. And when you're doing stuff, it's really community focused. People tend to submit things that they want to talk about because they're actually working on it, because they think it's exciting or it's something that just happened at work and it's fresh. When you go to the commercial event, especially if you're in the industry, you get pushed to submit multiple talks and they accept one. What are the chances it's something that you're really passionate about versus something your boss made you submit? And I find that in general, anything that's really community focused people bring what they're interested in and they're doing. It's engaging because it's what people are interested in or actually working on day to day. And that's part of the magic of BSides, in my opinion, as well as the sense of community that brings. Because if you think it's cool, we're going to talk about it later. And when we do that, that conversation leads to community. And that's the magic of these things.
Jack, it was an absolute honor. It was super generous of yourself to share all of that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
much.
Have a good one.
Goodbye.
Bye.